So, and I will say, we're very pleased. There was a concurrent requirement by Dean, our Chief Operating Officer, and this committee to look at a regional approach, and that has really served us well in terms of the Parliamentary Commissioner for the Environment, who's commended Auckland, which I'm going to touch on again later. So we're very grateful that everyone has come together at this time to say, let's look at something regional. We ran a workshop, which I'll touch on in a minute, in August, and we've been working with a group across Council, Auckland Transport and Parnuku to make sure that we're actually working in collaboration. Our aim is to align our work programmes around asset management and other initiatives. We are quite focused on that asset management side of things because we're seeking consistency across our projects and approaches in terms of how we manage our coastal asset. So from August, from the time when we workshop the principles with you, we've been developing a structure in which we can embody those principles and thinking about the way we can implement them. So I apologise for the poor presentation of the document itself. I hear it didn't come through well in the copy, but you'll see from the document that we haven't come to you with a decision to consult on in terms of how to do strategies. We've come to you with a proposal to engage to develop the decision-making framework with the governance bodies of Auckland. So we will collaborate with the Secretariat of the Maori Independent Statutory Board and Mana Whenua and the local boards as the key stakeholders in developing the framework for how we make those decisions. The principles are put into the document, the ones that we workshopped, in a table. What we talked about for those principles was implementing them through this regional decision-making approach and using strategic plans to implement them, and then developing some supporting policy and technical tools. The principles themselves are very much in line with the RMA, Local Government Act and New Zealand Coastal Policy Statement, really about thinking long-term and bringing our stakeholders with us. And we recognise that other councils, when they've sought to address the wider coastal issues of erosion and flooding, haven't always brought the stakeholders with them, and that's not something we want to do ourselves. So we're proposing significant engagement. We're starting with supporting presentations to local boards and Mana Whenua, because we need specific engagement in terms of the decision-making framework and the ultimate strategy document. Once we've completed the decision-making framework, we'll bring the document that you have appended into a guidance document of how to undertake the regional approach to erosion, sea level rise and climate change effects, and bring it back to RSP with a new title. That will effectively be the guide of how to do coastal compartment management plans, which have been identified as the vehicle to deliver. We do envisage that each plan will have separate engagement, because each coastal compartment plan will be different, dealing with different issues and different stakeholders. And some projects will also be done in isolation of those CCMPs, and again will require separate engagement. We've also got other engagement, particularly from the Chief Sustainability Office, to raise awareness of the issues that Auckland is facing with the public. And we'll need a much wider approach to that, which is part of what we've talked about in an overall communication plan. We've also used our collaboration with AT and Parnuku as a lever to help us discuss preparedness with asset owners. So we as council officers will be doing a lot more in this space alongside civil defence to make sure that our assets, other than the coastal assets mentioned in this strategy, are ready. So our implementation plan, our way forward, which is what we're seeking approval from RSP to go ahead with, is this, to raise familiarity with the strategic approach followed with our stakeholders, to work with our stakeholders to develop that decision-making process and consult on the final strategic approach, to develop some policies and guidance tools, and to start work on those CCMPs. There's a project programme in the back of the document, so you'll see that we've got fairly ambitious timeframes to get all of this stuff done. And the Orewa approach referred to by the local board chair, Julia Parfitt, is actually on this slide showing those different area approaches that can be taken through a coastal compartment management plan approach. I think it's worth concluding that the Parliamentary Commissioner for the Environment applauded Auckland's approach in terms of thinking about these issues and developing a plan of how to deal with them, and noted that we're ahead of the rest of New Zealand in this. And we're doing it in an open way, bringing engagement in into the framework of what we do so that we can make good decisions.
Right, thank you, Sarah. Excellent presentation. And I just want to say that Mr. Kimpton has talked to the others, and he's come up with some different wording to take the word strategy out. So,
Sure.
So you don't.
Yep.
So,
Questions or comments? Be happy with that. Questions or comments?
well, how about we go through and have some questions, but hopefully there won't be too many questions, because we did raise a few issues when Board Chair Parfitt was at the table. So, but Councillor Webster, you're first up.
Well, no, I wanted to make a comment, but
Oh, well, okay. Councillor Watson, you
once
have
it's
a
on the
question?
table for discussion,
Yep.
you can...
During the report, reference is made a couple of times to the need for effective ongoing communication to inform the public. On the basis of what's happened with Orewa, there's ample scope for that to occur with local papers in our Auckland and council-generated press releases that wouldn't impinge on the budget that's hugely necessary for the actual works itself. Am I right in assuming that?
Yeah, I think certainly that the public engagement needs to be a variety of media and not just project specific. So, yeah, very much.
Thank you.
Through
Right,
the chair,
now we'll-
sorry.
Councillor Casey, you have a question?
Yeah, it was just to make sure that the social considerations, which are hard to measure but are intrinsically important to just about everybody who lives in Orewa. You mentioned it, Julia, the great interest. And one of the things that isn't in your strategy but is important to say out loud is that access to the water for children just to learn to swim is quite critical in this country.
Through the chair, I think
What's the question?
Officer Greg Holland sitting behind me actually made the point that the growth of Auckland is directly related to our environment. People move here because of the environment. So of course that's a massive consideration. But we're not developing the decision-making framework. We're asking you to help us develop that decision-making framework to make sure the important things are brought in.
Good. And now Mr. Naipara.
Kia ora, Mr. Chairman, just through you. I mean, the change to A is, I think, helpful, because I was somewhat confused about adopting a strategy, and then we were talking about a whole lot of engagement on a strategy, and I'm thinking, well, what are we adopting if we haven't even done that? So that clarifies that then, I guess, is that it's the framework to develop the strategy. Okay, thank you very much.
Sorry, can I? I think the other thing to remember is that these are local. It's a strategic approach to local issues to do with erosion. It's not a region-wide strategy we're talking about per se. That we have an approach. We want to take this coastal compartment approach, and when we think about a coastal compartment, for example, that Orewa beach length, we need to be quite strategic in that sense that we're technically strategic around how we deal with those issues, taking into account environmental, social and other outcomes. So that's the sense that we're using the word in, not in a policy sense.
Yes.
At the region-wide level.
I think, just through you, Mr. Chairman, the confusion was to approve the coastal management strategy.
Yeah.
And A.
Yes, and so there was
Through the chair, what we want you to approve is us getting on with it.
I understand that, but it reads like you're approving the strategy before it's even developed.
I've
And
taken
so
the
there
word
was
out.
there was an opportunity
thank
to
you.
get the wording clearer, and we've now, this is approval to get on with it.
Okay,
Thank
so the motion's moved by councillor.
No, before you go, just
Oh,
a
you got a
question.
Yeah.
I think councillor Cooper had a comment as well.
There's a question still.
I still quit. Well, I'm going to ask a question.
You asked a question, councillor.
Thank you. So, in terms of the impact of climate change on coastal erosion and inundation and so forth, how much uncertainty, despite what we're hearing, and some of it seems to be quite worrying, but how much uncertainty is there given things like tectonic deformation, earthquakes, land shifts and so forth around how much sea level rise is actually occurring currently?
Okay, through the chair. So sea level...
And the work that you're doing will help us address those
It
issues.
will, it will. I will say, through the chair, I've been a coastal engineer for 25 years. When I started, we were using rates of sea level rise to make sure that our designs worked. None of us knew at the time why the sea was rising, but we knew that it was rising measurably in 1990 when I started work. So we were actually using rates of sea level rise then. The understanding what caused it came later, but the sea is rising and has been rising for some time. The rates of rise are more uncertain, but they're actually, on the scale of things we can manage versus not manage, they're less unpredictable than the movements of the tectonic plates in terms of their effects, which is why we are seeking to bring in some of that management into what we do.
Thank you. And Mr. Walcott, you got a question?
Yes. I'm just trying to line this up. How does this match into Te Reo Takutai Moana 2011? Coastal, Marine and Coastal Areas Act.
Well, do you want to answer that one?
Through the chair again, broadly that fits with some of the regulatory framework that Sarah explained that we need to apply to our thinking. So we went through the Resource Management Act, New Zealand Coastal Policy Statement, some of our regulatory planning, including the Foreshore Seabed Act. Those are critical things that guide or direct what's appropriate to consider. Those things are going to be balanced against the community expectation and balanced against some of the technical, I guess, limitations or requirements of what we can promote in those environments. Those are things that we'll need to unpack with our decision-making framework that we're going to develop, and that sits really closely with some of the public education as well around what we're being directed to consider, what's appropriate in that respect, and what some of the limitations might be.
Yeah, I have got a few questions, Chair, if you don't mind. So 31, I just wanted to ask, do you think we're scaremongering people? I mean, a meteor might land here today. I mean, there's all that kind of thing. I mean, I'm just trying to get that, because the question I'd ask is how many people actually know that they're 5 metres below mean high water springs, 10 metres above mean high water springs, all of that. I mean, how many people know? I mean, I've seen it on our GIS system, but how many people actually know that? It's not on a limb. There's nothing there that tells you you're going to get flooded in 20 years.
Through the chair, you're right. It's not on limbs, and part of the reason that it's not on limbs is that we know that we need to raise public awareness before we do anything like putting it on limbs. So this is part of that public engagement piece. I think it's fair to say that the Parliamentary Commission for the Environment report, which looked at the figures that we're using, made the point that the change hasn't all happened yet, and it's good that we've got time to plan for it. But that isn't scaremongering. That's really thinking about the long-term sustainability of what we do.